Hello everyone, welcome to our second online curriculum session. If you haven't had the chance, you can view our first online session, STEM in Space, as well as some introductory videos about the design program we use, 3D printing, and MakerGirl as a whole on our channel. This week our theme is animals. Let's begin our session with an icebreaker to get our minds running. So I'll be going through this little icebreaker first, and then if you're around people, you can definitely go through and do this icebreaker as well and answer the questions with me or after me. So let me start by speaking a little bit about myself. My name is Val, and I am in my third year of college, or also known as the 15th grade. My favorite animal is an elephant because I just think they're so majestic. If I could have any pet, it would be a pet unicorn because I've always wanted to learn how to ride a horse, and a unicorn is basically a really cool horse. And if I could be any animal, I would probably want to be a bird so I can fly over buildings and nature, just enjoy the wind. And my favorite animal noise would have to be an elephant. They usually go toot toot. So I think that's really cute. So now we're going to go over today's activities. Today we will be printing animals. So our schedule is as follows. We're going to learn how 3D printing relates to animals, brainstorm your design on paper, create your idea in Tinkercad, and then as this is our online session, what we're going to do is that you're going to submit your design and we're going to pick 3 designs to then put into our 3D printer and send. So this is how it's going to be kind of different than our regular sessions, because in our regular sessions we would transfer your model into the 3D printer, print, and we would do everything right there in our session. But this is really cool because we'll be able to mail you your print and everything. We're then going to go over our animal prosthetics activity, go look at a famous woman in STEM, and then you're going to present your design to the people around you. So I mentioned famous women in STEM. Now, what is STEM, though? What do you think STEM stands for? Take a minute to come up with your answer. Have you figured it out? Cool, let's go over it together. So the S in STEM stands for science, the T stands for technology, the E stands for engineering, and the M stands for math. As you can probably tell, these topics kind of go hand in hand with each other. Like engineering and technology both kind of focus on science and math is definitely used in science. So the topics in STEM definitely overlap with each other. So now we're going to go over and brainstorm what we can make for animals from 3D printing. So you're going to get into small groups and brainstorm a list of things you can 3D print for animals, or you can do this by yourself. So we can make something fun that's 3D printed, or something like a bowl that our animals can drink from. You'll notice that the use and the intended use of our design plays a strong role in how we think about it. Because if we want our design to be fun, we have to design it in a different way than we would if we wanted to design a bowl, right? Which makes the design process really cool. Now that we have our own ideas about what we can 3D print for animals, let's take a look at an example of our ideas coming to life.
10 News is premiering a new
So
series
this
we're
is
calling
Nikita
Kids Doing Good
Krishnan.
Things. And
She
it's just
is
that.
a
We are profiling an
16-year-old from
exceptional
San
child
Diego,
or kid
California,
doing
and she
incredible
builds
things for
prosthetics
others
for
in their
dogs from
community.
home.
And this morning we want to
This
introduce you to a
video
girl
will
who's
explain
literally
a lot
giving
more about
animals a leg to
Nikita's
stand on.
3D printing process.
Let's face it, young people don't have the best reputation for being America's greatest generation.
I'm 16. People tend to underestimate teenagers.
But after meeting Nikita Krishnan,
Oh, thank you.
beautiful, the future looks bright.
I felt like I could do more.
Nikita's just starting her junior year at the Bishop's School in La Jolla. But her story begins when she took a family trip to India.
And I would see a lot of stray three-legged dogs, and it kind of broke my heart. I just was not used to seeing them.
At first, she begged her parents for a dog of her own.
No.
They would always tell me no, and so to try and convince them even more, I would make PowerPoint presentations.
Instead, Dad got her something that doesn't drool, shed, or bark, but would rescue animals just the same.
I basically wanted to design my own prosthetics because I love technology.
That's right, Nikita uses her 3D printer from Dad to build prosthetic legs and splints for dogs.
It's all about geometry.
Input the dog's precise measurements. Then, layer by layer, the printer dispenses biosafe plastic material to carefully weave the splints.
I need to convert it to G-code.
But it turned out building and designing was the easy part. Convincing people that a 16-year-old girl could help heal a living, breathing animal was the rough part.
That's good.
Until the Greyhound Adoption Center took a chance on Nikita's creations.
And then we wrap that in.
What may have cost pet owners hundreds of dollars, Nikita can now build on her printer for just 15 bucks.
Made me feel like I could do anything, and success is addictive.
Success also requires a certain level of responsibility, kind of like taking care of her own dog.
Can she still not get a dog?
We're working on it right now.
There's still a chance.
Yes.
10 News salutes Nikita Krishnan, a caring kid doing good things.
A great family and a great young lady right there. Nikita has turned her creations into a nonprofit called Creature Comfort and Care. This is her website there. If you know a dog that could benefit from Nikita's creations, or you want to help contribute to her nonprofit, the Creature Comfort and Care, we can link you to her website on ours. It's 10news.com.
Maybe a tiger.
A tiger. Hey,
Needs a new
she
leg.
loves animals just like Meg. I thought about you when I was talking to her because she just,
fell
in love with them at a young age.
Man, I just complained and complained when I couldn't get a dog. That's amazing, making something so amazing that so many people are going to be able to benefit from. So, yeah, I mean, that's a kid, an adult, anybody doing a good thing.
And we're taking nominations, by the way, for the next Kid Doing Good Thing, so send them our way.
I'd love to see what we're going to find out.
So let's take Nikita's words to heart and try to challenge ourselves by brainstorming our very own designs. Before designing your design on Tinkercad, you're going to take some time to think about what you would like to create or 3D print. So you're going to pick something related to animals and start drawing it on paper, or you can even model it in 3D with paper and other supplies that you have. So right now is our brainstorming part. So you're going to pause the video and then you're going to click play when you're ready for the next step. So now that you've brainstormed your design and you kind of see what shapes or make it up, we're going to use Tinkercad. So right here is a photo of what it looks like to create a new design on Tinkercad. You're going to have a really big blue work plane and shapes along the right side of your screen. So the two main things we want you to keep focus on is that you want to keep everything on the blue work plane, and you want to make sure that everything is flat on the work plane too, and that the color of your shapes do not matter. All of your design will come out in one color, and so the colors do not matter for when they're being printed. If you would like more instruction on how to use Tinkercad, feel free to watch our video on Tinkercad that's on our channel for more help. So this is the Tinkercad designing portion of our video, so you're going to pause the video and click play when you are finished with your design and ready for the next step. So how do 3D printers work? How would we get your design from the computer to a 3D printer? So it's actually very simple. What we do is we take your Tinkercad design, we download it into this file called an STL file, and we put it in our Cura software. We then kind of fiddle around with the size of your print, trying to make it a little bit bigger, trying to make sure that everything fits within our printer. And then we download that file onto an SD card. These are usually seen in cameras and kind of hold graphic images. And so we're going to then insert our SD card into our printer. And then select your design. So what's behind the printer is this really large spool of plastic. So when we start trying to print your design, the printer has to heat up in order to melt plastic so that it can dispense it out layer by layer. As the hot plastic is leaving the tube, it's going to start to cool with the room temperature. So as the printer starts layering it on, the plastic is actually cooling and becoming more solid. And that's how we end up 3D printing your design. So now we're going to start the activity portion of our session. We're first going to go through some vocabulary though. So what are prosthetics? A prosthesis is an artificial body part to replace a missing one. Prosthetics is a specialty of medicine and engineering that designs, constructs, and fits artificial limbs and body parts, also known as prostheses. An amputee is a person who has had a limb removed. An engineer is a person who applies understanding of science and math to create things for the benefit of humanity and our world. As you can see, engineer, science, math are already three of the different parts that make up STEM, and so they kind of relate with each other. Then there's bioengineering, the use of artificial tissues, organs, or organ components to replace damaged or absent parts of the body, such as artificial limbs and heart pacemakers. So bioengineering is kind of like engineering with a focus on biology and the science behind these tissues and organs. A biomedical engineer is an occupation that includes designing artificial body parts, and a prototype is an original, full-scale, and usually working model of a new product or new version of an existing product. Now, you've probably seen some examples of prosthetics being used on people, but there's also various types. Now, you've probably seen some examples of prosthetics being used on humans, but there's also various types of prosthetics for animals. A lot of them involve mobility. So as you can see from each of these pictures, many of the prosthetics being used are for dogs, cats, or other animals such as turtles not having certain body parts that are used for movement, such as legs. And there's also different types of prosthetics used for birds. So when their beaks are broken, such as can be seen in the bald eagle, they need something replaced there in order for them to continue living their daily lives. There's also mobility that is needed not just for land creatures, but for sea creatures as well. So in our activity, which is called Animals Prosthetics, we are bioengineers working for our local veterinary clinic, and the clinic needs our help. 4 patients are in trouble and missing parts or limbs. We will need to select a patient to help, design 2 to 3 sketches of possible solutions, and determine one design to doodle as a prototype. We're going to determine which of our designs best meets the design constraints for each patient. So right now we're going to pick one patient from the worksheet with the people around you or by yourself. Research the selected animal that we will be modeling. Complete the design process worksheet as we work. Determine the best design and model it on Tinkercad, and describe our prototype and function with everyone. So our worksheet, which is linked down in the description below, has 4 different types of patients. But if I did all of them, that would be no fun for you or the people around you. So we're going to go through the first patient with each other. So our first patient is a mallard duck that was critically injured after running head-on into a French bread truck headed to the bakery. Its beak is cracked on top and bottom and will need to be replaced with a prosthetic beak that opens and closes, as well as strains dirt, rocks, and debris from its drinking supply to prevent the duck from choking. So in order to first create the solution to our problem, we're going to follow the engineering design process. We're first going to ask what's the problem and what are the limitations. These are known as constraints. We're then going to imagine, which is the same thing as the brainstorming we've done this entire session. After we brainstorm, we're going to choose our best solution. We're then going to plan. We're going to draw it out and make a materials list of what we'll need. We'll then create our design, either by making it on Tinkercad or from objects that you have at home. We're then going to improve it and try to always make it better. So we're first going to identify our problem. What is the goal of our task? What do we already know? And what are the limits or our constraints? So now we're going to go back to our animal prosthetics activity little summary about our duck. And we're going to focus on answering these questions. So in green is what we know. We know that our duck's beak is cracked on the top and bottom. Our overall goal is to replace the beak with the constraints that it needs to open and close and strain dirt, rocks, and debris from its drinking supply to prevent choking. So now we're going to look at this wonderful picture of a mallard duck and focus really on its beak, because when you are identifying the problem, you also want to do some research in order to fully be able to brainstorm your designs. So as we look at this majestic duck, what do we notice? We notice that our beak has little holes at the top. We notice that the bottom part of our beak is a little bit smaller than the upper part. And we notice that it has smooth ridges along the side of the beak, and that there's little tiny sticks coming out of the duck's upper beak. These are actually what helps filter the water and debris. So those considerations will all need to be into our design. Will all need to be implemented into our design. So after identifying and researching, we are going to brainstorm some ideas. How can we solve the problem and achieve the goal? So let's list out some possible ideas and pick one best idea to try. So for right now, I want you to create your own brainstorm idea list, and then we'll compare. So some ideas that I had were to cover the cracks with some kind of plastic coating, or we could use a folded paper plate to try to create some kind of design because it's more flexible and the duck needs to be able to open its mouth. And we're going to construct a new beak of plastic, with open edges to filter. So, although we have 3 ideas, we can start narrowing down which ones seem like they're going to work and which ones probably won't seem like they're going to work. Like the paper plate, for one reason. Paper is very dissolvable in water, and so it probably won't work when the duck is trying to drink some water or to eat. And if we just focus on covering the cracks, then we're never going to address the other needs of the duck, which is the fact that it still can't filter the water out from its food. So then we choose our best, or my best, at least from what I brainstormed, solution, which is constructing a new beak of plastic with open edges. So that after we brainstorm, we're going to plan it, right? We're going to design our solution. We're going to think about how many parts are there, we're going to draw it out, and we're going to make a list of the steps we'll take and our list of materials. So following this, I created a little design. I focused on making sure that we had all our constraints on there. So the bottom half portion of our duck's beak is smaller than the top half. I added the little edges of plastic for filtering, and then put little screws at the top, at the flat part, so that it can move up and down. And then I colored in the beak yellow because the mallard's beak was yellow. So my step-by-step guide was to make sure that we took measurements of the mallard's beak, and then we would cut the plastic into the shape and size of the original beak of the mallard, use tiny pieces of plastic to create the edges of the beak, and then use a screwdriver to place 2 screws along the flat side of the beak so that it can flap. And hopefully our duck will be able to quack with their friends again. So after I planned this design out, I then went ahead and created it. I created my design on Tinkercad. I made sure I used the scribble function to kind of create the oval shape, the half oval shape that was needed for the beak, and then some cylinders that signified screws. I also used some tiny squares to focus on where the filtering material would be. Typically in design, you work with a team so that you can bring different ideas to the design. So as you're working together, you want to kind of constantly ask questions and see if you're addressing all of the constraints and managing your time effectively, because sometimes the duck is on a deadline. The duck has to go out and fly away. So you need to manage time well. But the best way to know if your design works is to test it and evaluate it. Which parts of it will work, which parts of it don't work, and how do you make changes? And so with my design, I focused a little bit more on kind of drawing it out, but if I went back to see which part would work or which wouldn't, maybe the screws are too hard and we would need something more flexible to hold the beak together so that it doesn't limit the duck's movement of its beak. And does the filtering really work? Like, we would have to test that out too. And as we begin asking these questions and answering them and evaluating our overall design, we can make changes and hopefully create the best design that we can. So now that you have your own model, I really want you to share your final design with those around you. Make sure to present them with the problem first, because they should know what the problem is before you introduce your solution. And if you are in a team with people, make sure to let every team member talk, especially talk about what their role in creating the design was. So let's move on to a final reflection. What were some of the challenges during the whole design process? I know that some of the challenges that I definitely have had in the past was in trying to use Tinkercad, but also trying to create different ideas. Sometimes I would get stuck and not really know how to address a problem, which is why it's really good to talk to people to kind of bounce ideas off of each other. So yeah, what you do during challenges is that what I did was I tried to talk them out and see if I could get other people's opinions on how to solve these issues. Now reflect on what your challenges were and how you faced them. Now we're going to talk about a famous woman in STEM, Beatrice Alice Hicks. She was the first female hired by Western Electric. She was the owner of Newark Controls Company and developed environmental sensors used by the U.S. space program. This included the Apollo moon landing missions. She also co-founded and was the first president of the Society of Women Engineers in 1950, which now has 27,000 members, more than 27,000 members to date, including me, which is really cool. So let's remember Beatrice Alice Hicks and her contributions to STEM. Now let's do a little bit of show and tell with your design. So if you want to go around to the people around you and show your design off and tell them what you created today, what were the shapes that you used, and what was your overall goal in designing this and how you brought it to life. Some questions to ask yourself and to respond to the people around you is, what was the hardest part of designing, and what was your favorite thing that you learned about 3D printing today? I want to thank you all for coming to this session and listening to it. I hope it was a really good time and that you've learned something about 3D printing and women in STEM. Thank you.